Mr. Mayor, it's time.
Call this special meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Donald Lewis,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales, Councilmember Mitch Lindemann,
Here.
Councilmember Dani Acosta, Councilmember Ray Shelton,
Present.
Councilmember Michael Valdenegro,
Present.
Councilmember Jose Grijalva,
Here.
and honorable people. City Attorney Dennis Fitzgibbons,
Here.
City Treasurer Luis Pedrosa,
Present.
Mr. Mayor, for the record, Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales, Councilmember Dani Acosta, and City Manager Honorable People are excused.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, persons wishing to address the council on writing or verbally on any item not on the agenda. Do we have anybody this evening?
I do not have any remarks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 4, presentation discussion regarding the adoption of the 2023 amendments to the Douglas zoning code and chapter 2.32 to amend certain provisions to the update of rules and regulations to zoning within the city of Douglas and amending certain provisions of articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 of title 17 of the Douglas zoning code and amending chapter 2.32 of the Douglas municipal code relating to the planning and zoning commission. As you remember, this is a continuation of what we were discussing last month. And so, Mr. Strasburg, would you please pick us up where we left off?
So the last meeting, we had a lot of discussion, or a number of items that council was concerned about, and we provided to you a document that shows the changes that we've made in the summary table per section. Highlighted in yellow with strike throughs as appropriate and underlined also as appropriate. And we've also prepared for you the actual language of those pages, all of those pages that we made from the last one. So I would also want to add that we also have brought before you for your consideration the overlay district maps for the mixed use infill overlay and for the historic preservation overlay districts as requested. And we also prepared for consideration piece summary, or rather a summary of the comparison for Cochise County, Douglas, and other county jurisdictions. And we've also provided some calculations of what a typical single family residence per cost in Douglas and for other jurisdictions. So we have to also go through this comparison. We may not have the information accurate about the other impact fees because they don't necessarily stay what we do. But the main end of that particular comparison chart is that we have combined the construction permit, the and so you see how we might not, and that's again more discussion later. But first I'd like to go through each of the sections that we presented. So if you have any questions along the way, I'd be happy to answer them. We'll start with Article 2 or 17 to establishment of the district zoning map. 17 and 201D. We're renumbering it, but we're also taking out the language about vacating streets or alleys. Since statute is likely to have anyway. The next change is also to replace the signature of the mayor attested by the city clerk, and regardless of the most recent ordinance adopted. And we can still bring forward to you the voting district map as amended after the ordinance is made effective. But we also generally rewrite those voting district maps and provide them to you at your year, so that you're receiving that as well. The next one at the bottom of the first page is that we're aligning code long-term practice, replacing the Board of Adjustment, city planner for interpretation. Pluralizing references, and also that appeals to the Board of Adjustment are still included. And also that we have that minimums, the following should be included in an appeal provided to the city manager. Excuse me, Bill, you're talking about the appeal, the city manager for interpretation. Was that might integrate some more control in the city manager? If the decision, the interpretation of the city mayor is appealed, it would go first to the manager. They would have to have been provided an so the that would be behind their and facts. They create a six facts and take into account in waiting. If the decision of the city manager is satisfactory to the outcome, which you can then do. Thank you. Please, Mr. Mayor, and Council, we move on to general provisions. Article 1703. With 1703, we made that the petitioning is a process that will be administered requirements. So that if there's an appeal or 1703, 310A for conditions of use. We're renumbering, adding responsibility in reference to the amended administration and enforcement, adding planning and zoning to commission, and reference to section 1703, 310C. Level 3, and the strategy, we were renumbering the beginning for with all the reference and conditions. Also, here to section 1703, 310L. It is left hanging there, so we want to make sure that we have. And 1703, 311D for temporary uses. Appeals to the city manager, then board adjustment, fees. The notification of publication costs paid by an applicant, it will also remove statutory people. That would be the next subsection 311E, still in temporary uses. The reference to public works department, very specific department or division, so that as problems may arise with temporary uses for backflow prevention purposes, the appropriate officer will be able to handle that. And also that alcohol temporary uses need to have city and agency appropriate agency approval consistent with statute. In the next section of general provisions is on splitting, combining, or adjusting boundaries of lots. That's section 314. We've remembered it. We've also been able to include procedural and substantive requirements to agency approval as with any application. We also had consultation include the determination of results of the proposed amendment, adjustment, splits, in combination with the compliant code. That that sort of a preliminary discussion would actually get to the point where we basically are looking at a proposal that we could approve. And so we get that ahead of time before they file for surveys and so forth.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, please, Mr. Lindemann.
Mr. Osborne, when we're talking about people splitting their parcels, what is the minimum that we have to do a split? There has to be a minimum size, isn't there?
Yes, per each zoning district. Exactly. And so what we would do is have a discussion with the applicant or the prospective applicant to find out what it is that they would like to do. And find out whether or not our zoning would allow that for where the property is located. And in some cases, it wouldn't be, and we would provide that information to them up front. And if they wish to find some way of changing it, then they'd have to find another process, possibly a rezone. But again, we don't have any zoning districts that are less than 6,000 square feet for residential currently. Whereas our commercial districts could be subdivided or split into smaller pieces. There's no minimum lot size, except for heavy industry.
So the minimum is 6,000 square feet.
For single family residential, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And so also, we have added in that splits require a record or certification of survey, but that lot combinations or lot line adjustments require exhibit drawings with legal descriptions. They could have a certificate of survey, but they could also be presented to us with exhibit drawings with the legal descriptions provided. Next. And then next, we're moving on to some of our zoning districts, incorporating the renumbering of our conditional use permits. And so the 1705, 501 for single family residential zoning district, we have added in the renumbering just to be consistent, making sure those references are consistent. And so we provided this to you just as for your information, but that's all fairly much housekeeping. Let me just keep moving through those. Until we get to section 513 of 1705. The Historic Preservation Overlay Zoning District. We have removed the typo of superimposes in front of the word superimposed. Also add the word facades and add major before additions to allow for minor additions as administrative review. Referencing Article 17.10 administration for authority. In 513.2, we're updating the separation distance references with council resolution decision on established entertainment district. And also we've corrected some typos, added brewing use, distilling use, winery use, and also replacing issued by city council with consistent with the ARS, which already includes the council resolution would need to have been passed. We have word choice in section 513.4, historic rather than historical, when it refers to buildings. Also, we've added importantly, for your consideration, exemptions. This is where we kind of fell on the rocks, and my apologies. The intent was to provide us with more administrative latitude, but there are some things which even consistent with our historic preservation overlay design guidelines could be considered as exempt activities, including cleaning and so forth. We would still want to have discussion with a potential project person, just to let them know that we have resources available to us to help guide them in appropriate treatment of their cleaning and their brick repointing and so forth. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has a number of resources available just to help people make sure that if they wish to keep their building historic in character, that they're able to do it the right way. But we've added those exemptions, and so those activities are listed in the language there and highlighted in yellow. And we still have minor, but that minor has been made a little more lean from those exempt activities being set out inside and put up front. And then major improvements are also spelled out. We again have the city planner or designee thereof identified as authorities for doing administrative review and also in communication with the design review board. Appeal of administrative design review is provided and removal of published notification of decisions, as this is not required by the Arizona statute, and it's just an additional cost for us and for applicants. We've added for the criteria in 513.5 as a matter of housekeeping, the reference to the historic preservation overlay guideline, overlay design guidelines.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry for not jumping in one section back on 513.4. Did that address some of the concerns that Councilman Grijalva brought up before, as far as like emergency covering of windows or quick replacement of windows due to vandalism, et cetera? Mr. Baldenegro was asking that question also. Does that cover that, or?
And I think the answer is yes. We provided also that there's that we could have retroactive emergency permitting, and there are some authorities of a building inspector that they could have by building code, the option to allow for work to proceed based on an emergency situation in order to correct something that's, you know, could be a hazard to the residents or the building. And so we could, as long as we were provided some notification, that we would follow up to look at issuing a permit, right, on work that needed to be done because a window was broken or a roof, you know, collapsed in or something like that.
Does that make sense, gentlemen? We need to look at. We need to spend some time in that area. Or?
No, I think, as long as, the owners are happy with what they're doing to the building. You know what I mean? I said, there's people out there, that's the whole point of the building,
Right.
once they cross off that, you know, they made it to their lighting. So I think it's, as long as the owner do whatever they want to do, as long as it follows code. You know what I mean? That's all right. Only by code, not a fire hazard or anything else, so.
Councilman Grijalva, did you have anything on that?
I mean, I appreciate the retroactively, you know, basically they're gonna fix it, then they come back. For me, it's just logical where if, let's say, a window breaks, they're not gonna get a different color window. They're not gonna get a different size window. They're going to get the same one, like the other ones that are around there. For me, it's just, it's too much bureaucracy. You know, for me, and also if we go back to point C, where it says you don't need a permit for the following maintenance, repairs, or replacement, and C is repointing or replacing brick or other masonry in kind. I see it as sort of the same thing. If you're gonna replace the bricks because it's essential to the foundation, why, you know, the window, it would be essential to the business, because if it rains or if there's vandalism, if they leave a cardboard there, it's easy to take down. I just feel like staff might be taking too much responsibility that they don't need to take. And then at that point, you know, so I'm still in sort of disagreement with that. You know, if they want to repair it. If they want to add a window, then I think that's a different situation. But if they want to repair something, again, it's decentivizing them from coming downtown and building. I'd rather just build on Fifth Street or around the other places where they can just repair them right away.
If I may,
Please, Mr. Osborne.
it's in fact listed in exempt activities and improvements, notification and guidance. We're only asking to be a resource for folks who have historic buildings, but it's not going to be our responsibility to administer for those activities, cleaning, repainting, repointing brick, or replacing it in kind. So we're actually taking ourselves out of that. We are getting out of regulating that, okay, when it comes to replacement and repairs.
So it's if the window breaks, they no longer have to come to City Hall.
That would be correct. We would just want to know. It would probably be a good thing for us to know, so that way we could also pass word along to the police.
I just want to ask along those lines also. If what happens, vandalism, window breaks, and it's an old building and you can't find any of the parts anymore. Now, is this going to be a problem when they want to fix something and you have to put something different in?
That's a good question. When you're looking at replacement with something that's not in kind, our design guidelines may actually have something to say about that. But that's in a separate document, the design guidelines. We're just looking at what are some of the activities that we can identify upfront that we don't need to be involved in. We don't need to issue any permits. We don't need to have a design review board, hold a public hearing. Not necessary. There still may be some improvements that would require design review, but we're making it so that some of those, based on the scope of how much change is being proposed, could be handled administratively instead of, again, let's go to the board of, the design review board and have a public hearing next month and so forth. We're trying to make it a little bit easier to fix up our downtown.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Go ahead, please.
No, I said thank you.
In other words, if they needed a normal building permit, they'd need to come get a building permit. Other than that, probably wouldn't.
That's
That's
correct.
safe to say.
That's correct. Right, so the building permit, them needing a building permit is what would trigger the requirement for design review anyway. It's just, well, there's some projects that, like, I think we probably had 2 projects that just went to the design review board last night. All 4 projects that went before them were unanimously approved. At least 2 of those projects, I would say, probably could have been handled administratively. But we don't have anything in our code that says this is an administrative, this is minor. It just says, hey, things could be minor. It's like, well, what is that? We're trying to actually put some values to that. And I know it's a sticky wicket, but if we don't, then everything can be considered major by somebody. And we don't want to get in trouble with somebody filing an appeal.
Thank you. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. And so for the next item is in section 516, A and B, the proposed innovative community overlay zones. Allow for properties within future designated overlay to be legal conforming for reinvesting or expanding existing structures and uses while allowing for redevelopment as intended by the underlying zoning with more flexible development standards. And so again, these innovative community overlay zones are proposed really not to take anything from someone. It's just to add the possibility if they would like to continue the existing use, if it's in violation of the zoning code, it would no longer be so. Notification of project intent provided to abutting neighbors after pre-application meeting with development services in section 516H. And also with appeals, change notarized to written. So that way we're not having to notarize decisions of appeals or applications. And we're also, again, as part of these overlays, we're looking at providing the opportunity for neighbors to work together. Someone who wants to do a project and neighbors who may have some concerns would be put in the situation to resolve that among themselves. And then we would have proof that at least the effort was made from the applicant that we could then proceed. In
Yes, Mr.
17.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Mr. Bozanego, please.
Mr. Osborne, can you give me an example of overlay? Because what I'm picturing is that if me and Grijalva were residents, neighbors, I could put a structure like a carport onto his property, extending over to his property. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. No, the innovative community overlays really are intended to encourage infill development or redevelopment of properties that may be zoned, let's say, mobile home residence, as we had originally envisioned that the area of the Overlock addition would have an innovative community residence or residential overlay that would allow for single-family residential as of right, if an applicant would actually apply for it and say, I wish to apply the innovative community residence overlay to this property. And we wouldn't have to go through separate rezones for each of those proposals. If we wished, or someone wished to propose something different and innovative, truly innovative, we could listen to it. Instead of saying, well, this zoning district only allows for mobile homes. That's it. Or this residential neighborhood is zoned limited commercial for some reason. And the residences that are there are non-conforming. And there is a low likelihood that limited commercial would be built there at the scale that our current limited commercial zoning district allows. And in that situation, that's where we would propose a mixed use overlay, innovative community mixed use. So that way we could have the best of both worlds. If people want more flexibility, people want to mix things together, they could propose it. But we would also want for them to be working with their neighbors to help their neighbors understand this is the vision that I have. This is the vision that, and it seems like it would be consistent with city regulations. Are you okay with it? And if the folks are against it, we may have to have discussion of, well, you need to address your neighbor's concerns. So. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
So with, looks like we're getting close to the close, but I also do have something I've added to your packets for today. But getting to violations and penalties in Article 17.14 in section 1402, complaints regarding violations. We amended so that it's files complaints with the city clerk or development services, record complaints, then investigate and document findings prior to taking action to abate. Whereas currently it says take immediate action, and not all complaints are supported by our code. Some folks are in compliance, but the neighbor just doesn't like the way that their yard looks, even if they are in compliance. We also add public health as a reference in there, as is typical. We talk about the public health, safety, and general welfare, of which is usually referenced to support zoning or regulation of land use. We add that in there. And finally, we've added in an amendment to Article or Chapter 15.08 in buildings and permitting and fees. I had noticed it before, but for some reason it just sort of washed right over my head. But our person who is a finance wizard, Luis Pedrosa, noticed, hey, I see $57 times the factor of however many thousands of dollars are left after subtracting $50,000. Is that right? And so I had to let him know is that we haven't applied that, because after doing a calculation on a project that was just right in that sweet spot, where you have on, I think it's if you can turn to that one page of Chapter 1508, it's highlighted in yellow. It was $57, and we've been applying it as $5.70 per factor of 1,000 after doing the subtraction, because otherwise the permits were, a permit came out at something like $12,000, and I said, well, that's unique for a 1,011 or 1,100 square foot home. I don't think that's right. And so I looked at it and it's like, well, that is what is in our code. But we should not be charging somebody just because their project is right in that band, that much money. So we're proposing that change.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Brennan.
as long as we're on that section, Mr. Osborne, I just want to say for the record that I'm looking at this and they tweaked it a little bit. And so my original idea of 2% of the value and a filing fee, now that when I look at all these and calculate, it comes out just about the same. And so I appreciate that. I want to make sure that the homeowner with a small project is not going to be burdened with any undue bureaucracy or fees or anything like that. And so far, I think it looks pretty good. So thank you.
You're welcome. And so we prepared for you as well. Since this is an information evening, some comparisons of development fees. Development fees from ourselves, Cochise County, City of Sierra Vista, Bisbee, Benson, Tombstone, and Wilcox. We have the typical sizes of single family homes down to a small home of 600 square feet. and the valuation calculations that we use and that those other jurisdictions use to generate the project valuation, from which then permit fees are calculated, plan review fees are calculated, and for us, our filing fees are calculated. But there, as I found out, one of the jurisdictions, Wilcox, actually has calculates separate utility fee, or not utility fees, but plumbing fee, mechanical fee, and electrical fee based on the permit fee. So where I thought they might come in as being quite a bit maybe lower than us in overall charges, turns out that they would probably be very comparable or even higher in charging fees than we do. And I think that's the main thing with that particular comparison you'll see is that the city of Douglas is very reasonable. Perhaps, you know, it's very low on the end of what it charges for permit review and for plan review on our permits.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes, sir.
we still have an impact fee though.
We do.
Yeah, so that would be on top of any of these. If a developer came in and wanted to build.
We've included those in here, but those particular fees where it's not certain that the other jurisdictions apply those or not. Just to sort of show that the main comparison between ourselves and these other jurisdictions is going to be that last column on the right, where it says permit review and inspection and plan review only. So those are the fees that we actually are like basically head to head with these other jurisdictions, and what calculates out. Where you see that we're kind of on the low end, though Benson, in the way that they apply it, is low at the top end of unit size, and they pick up to where at the bottom end, they're higher than we are. And for jurisdictions like Bisbee and Sierra Vista, you'll see that they're substantially higher than we are. We're at 1,600. If we have a 2,000 square foot house, our valuation of $52 per square foot gives you $104,000 valuation for the project. Our total for permit review and inspection and plan review fees is just under $1,700. Cochise County is at $2,600. You know, and Bisbee is over 3,000. Benson would be at 1,386, which is lower than us, but it's because they don't use valuation. They just go by size of a building. And if it's over 1,800 square feet, I think it is, or actually, I had to check my math internally, but they have something of a threshold where if it's over a certain size, I think it might be actually 1,200 square feet. That if it's over 1,200 square feet, then they calculate every square foot over that is 30 cents. And so down at the bottom end of things, if they have a 600 square foot or an 800 square foot home, they're actually, you're paying more fees than with us. Tombstone, I was a little surprised. And it, you know, some of this might possibly be in error, but their code references that they follow the updated valuations calculations for the International Codes Council, writes building codes. And that amount right now is $166 per square foot versus, again, City of Douglas, we are at 52, we charge $52. So if you look, that does have a significant impact on the permit fees and the plan review fees, to where they are looking like they would be the highest for any single family residence at $4,500. So I imagine if I have a YouTube fan in Tombstone, I might be hearing from them fairly soon to hear about whether or not that's an accurate number. But that's what the information we had available to us from the other city codes and from the county's code.
And just by reference, officially, that's item 4B on our agenda item that Mr. Osborne just presented to us, which is information discussion regarding the adoption of the 2023 amendments to Title 15 to amend certain provisions of Chapter 15.08 of the Douglas Municipal Code relating to building permits and inspection. For the record.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a.
Yes,
question.
Mr. Shelton.
Say if somebody goes to Wilcox or Sure Vista, or maybe they build them here, a small little storeroom. Are we, do they have to report that to you? They're bringing it in their backyard, say a 14 by 12 or 15 by 20 foot, how do we handle that, or do we?
It's a great question. We seek to have permits generated for any structure that's going to be placed or built on a property, simply because we have record then of where it's at. If we were to provide for some exemptions on certain fees, that's something we could consider, but we need to also consider our administrative cost. But we want to have records that we've actually made sure that whatever's being proposed is consistent with our zoning code, at least. And that's something that we've actually been recently having to deal with. We've had a number of complaints, neighbors against neighbors, property, their properties. One of them has a house that's built close to the property line, and a neighbor put a shed close to the property line. And so the neighbor with the house is complaining about impacts from that shed being so close to the wall. And at the same time, and also about rain flow onto their property. And then we look at the neighbor's house, and its overhang of its roof actually goes over the wall as well. And so it's like both neighbors have a problem. And if they had followed through with a permit, or if they had been instructed to do so, or at least to provide a site plan and some kind of as a courtesy permit, that we would know that this shed is at least 5 feet from the adjacent property line as required by that particular zoning district. But that wasn't done. And so that's why we look for folks to actually come to us, even if they're thinking that maybe I could just do this without a permit, is that there are some of our regulations require them to be separated from the property line because their neighbor's property has, a house located close on the property line. So that's why we want to make sure that we're at least getting something in the record that we have compliance with our codes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Any other questions from the council?
If I may, just
Yes,
one
please.
last comment, that I really appreciate you going through all this. And this looks like it's trimming a lot of the unnecessary words and the bureaucracy, and we all appreciate that. And I do think that this would be fair for the homeowner, and yet we cover the costs that the city incurs for, permitting and site visits and all that stuff. So I think this is a good thing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Anyone else? Anybody from the audience want to say anything? We're good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Item number 5, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lindeman, second by Mr. Shelton to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. We stand adjourned at 6:08.
Have a nice evening, everybody. Happy Memorial Day.